Hello viewers, welcome to this tutorial in which we are going to discuss about how to develop a login system using PHP and MySQL. The functionality that we are going to cover as part of this tutorial is registration, login, view profile and forgot password. Before I land on to the code, I would like to discuss about some key points. We are going to use the PHP session across the tutorial to store the logged in user information, the error messages that occurs and the success messages that occurs as well. There are some files which are common across each of the file in the tutorial, so we include those files in the includes folder. I would discuss about these files when we run through the code. Okay, what is the approach that we have taken in this tutorial? We are going to first discuss about the form creation, because all the screens that are there in this tutorial are forms. So we are going to discuss about the form creation, mapping it to the screen on the browser. Then we are going to discuss about client-side validations, how they are applied. Then we are going to discuss about the submission of the form, server-side validations, and if the form is successfully submitted, how the code executes. So let's land on to the code. Okay, so we would start with the register form. So this is the view file for the registration form called signup.php. Here we have first included the database file. We have kept this database connection file inside the includes folder because it is common across every file. So in this, what we have done is we have provided these connection details, and we have got an instance of MySQL extension, which is actually an improved MySQL for PHP. Okay, before that, let's log in into the look into the database for this tutorial. So the database is called login system, which we have declared in the db.php. It has got one table called tbl_user, and it has got these columns: username, email, password, first name, last name, status and hash. Okay, so this is the registration form, right? So let's see where this form is getting created. So this form is getting created over here. So we have the form action is signup.php, means the same file. Method is post. Autocomplete is kept as off, and these are the fields which are being displayed. So the first name, last name, username, email, password and confirm password, and this is the register button. Okay, now let's first submit the blank form. So if I click over here, you would see that it says that please fill out this field. What does this mean is this field is required. So how this is achieved in the form? So we have used required property over here when we are defining the input field. So for each of these fields we have kept it as required. So required. So each field is required over here. So this is actually the client side validation. Now we would see another client side validation, that is for email. So I'm filling in some value over here. Username I'm giving as msinghai. Email address I'm giving something invalid now, so abc @ okay, I'm giving some password over here, and I click on register. So it says that please enter a part following @abc @ is incomplete, which means that email is invalid. Okay, so these are the client side validations. Now let's discuss the let's submit the form and see how the server-side validation works. So let's give in a proper value over here for email so that it can bypass it. gmail.com. Okay, now I'm giving an invalid username. I'm giving some special characters and I'm giving password as, let's say, abc123, and this password as abc only, which is the confirm password. And now let me submit this form. So as soon as I submit this form, it gives me the error username is invalid. Only allowed characters are, it's A to Z, small a to Z, capital A to Z, 0 to 9, dot and underscore. And second error is confirm password should be equal to the input password. So now let's see how this execution takes place. So here we have defined the action for this form as signup.php, right? So as soon as I submit this form, what happens is it goes over here and it checks if the server request method is equals to post or not, and we have set up the method for the form as post. Now then we check that if $_post register is there. What does this mean is, because when we submit, this button value is gone into the post array, so this is register. So that's what we are checking over here. So if is set $_post register, then include the register.php file. This file actually contains the processing logic for the registration form. So let's come over here. So here we are into the register.php files. So the first thing that we are doing in this file is we are reading the variables from the post, and then we are applying this function of MySQL, which is real escape string. What this function do is this escapes the special character so that input is fit to be used with MySQL. So in this way we are fetching out all the variables from the post array. The special one over here is the password. From security perspective, we could not store the password into the database, so we store a hash for the password. So here we are using the password hash function. So using password hash and password bcrypt algorithm, we are storing the hash for the password in the database. Then this is the hash variable, which is actually used when we are doing the verification for the user and we are implementing the forgot password functionality. Here we are performing the validations. So right now, okay, before we start the validations, we set all the errors in the session to an empty array so that there are no old errors in the session. Okay, so in the case that we have just executed, these two validations have been executed. So we have checked for the invalid username, and we have checked that if confirm password is not equal to the input password, an error is stored into the session. But as we have provided the valid email, this error hasn't occurred. So now let's see. What we do over here is we change the type of this as text and not email. So what happens is now HTML side email validation doesn't apply, and this server side validation would apply on email. So let's refresh this form, provide some name over here, invalid username, email address abc@, password is abc123, and I click on register now. So what happens is it says that invalid email format. So actually this server side validation now applies, and as we have provided the invalid username, so this error is being displayed as well. Okay, Now there are two more server-side validations which are there. This is the case where, let's say, if user is registering and the username already exists, then we would show an error to the user. Also, the email that user is providing, if the email already exists in the database, we would display the error to the user. But we cannot check these validations right now because we don't have any user in the database. So first of all, let's create a user and then we would see how these validations work. Okay, now how the errors are being displayed on the front end is, so here we store the errors into the session, and here we check that if errors are there in the session and they are not empty, it means the form is being submitted. So we read all the data that is there in the post and we store it into the session like this: $_session form data and then the variable name, and then we redirect the browser to signup.php. Now let's see what happens on signup.php. So on signup.php, we would just check if there is errors in the session, and if they are not empty, we read the data from the session and we store them in the form variables, and then we use these variables in the form. So here we have used like first name, last name, username, email. So in this way, the values that user input would be repopulated into the form if some error occurs. Okay, now how the errors are displayed. So we have picked up the errors from the session. Then here we check if the errors are not empty, we would iterate over those errors and render them. After they are echoed, we would just set the errors in the session to empty array. So this is how the errors are being displayed onto the front end. Now let's create a valid user. So I would just change the values to proper values. So I would just provide the username as msingai, email as abc@gmail.com, password abc123, c123. Okay, and then I click on register. So now I have successfully registered into the system. So as soon as the user successfully registered into the system, this message would be shown to the user. Okay, what is this message actually? Because we are just testing it on localhost and the mail functionalities normally doesn't work on localhost. We can do the setup for that so that the mail functionality work on the localhost, but we need to, I mean, for a beginner, I mean, it would be difficult for him to make those settings. So that's why what I have done is I have just shown the email message over here. So here it would say, hello user, welcome to login system, please click this link to activate your account, and this is the activation link. Okay, now let's see how this code flow executes. So as soon as the form is submitted, what we have discussed earlier, that this file is invoked, so it enters into the register.php, all the validations got passed. Then here, as there are no errors, so we would insert the data into the database over here, and then if the data is inserted successfully, then we would set a success message in the session, which is confirmation email has been sent to the registered email, which is actually shown over here. And then we prepare the email, and this is how you can just send out the email. So as I have mentioned that mail is not, assuming mail is not working on localhost, so just printing it on the screen. So I have just printed this message body using this session variable. So when you are in the live code, you can just remove this line and you can uncomment this line, so that as mail is, so user would receive this message into the email. And now let's go to signup.php. So here what happens is, as there are no errors, so this statement would not be executed. Now here we would just check that if there is a success message in the session, which we have set over here. So what happens is, and it's not empty, so it would just render the success message. We have also set an additional variable called verification link, so this is what we are displaying as well. And after echoing them, we would just unset these variables in the session. And uh, as there are no errors, so form values are not repopulated and they are just initialized with these values. So this is how this form is being displayed after successful submission. Next, we would look into the verification of the user part. Okay, now this is the activation link that we have. It is calling activation.php with these arguments, email and hash. So as you see, email is encoded and this is the hash value. Now let's see how these variables are created. So if we go to register.php, you would see that we apply the base64 underscore encode function on email. And how hash is generated, we have generated the hash over here. So what we have done is we have called rend function, which picked up the value between 1 and 1000 and then apply md5 on it. So this is how hash variable is created. Now let's hit this URL on the browser. So we would not run it correct for the first time so that we can see the validation errors. So here I am removing hash and I am hitting enter. It shows me an error that invalid request. So how this error comes up? So if you go into activation.php, what we are doing, we are just including the database file, then we are starting the session, and then we are checking if email and hash, they are into the $_ get array or not, and their values are not empty. If any of this condition fail, it goes into this else loop where we set the error in the session and then heading the request to index.php. And in index.php, we are simply reading the errors like this and then iterating over the errors and rendering them, and then setting the errors to the empty array. Similarly, if I remove the email, I would get the same error. Now let's verify the user. So I click enter. So here the message is being displayed is your account has been successfully activated. Now let's see how this execution takes place. So if we go into activation.php, so we read the email from request and we apply the base64 underscore decode function to get the actual email. Then we apply this real escape string function on both email and hash to make the values fit for database operation, and then we pick up the record from the database against this email and hash with the status as inactive and not active. This is very important. So if the results return as 0, it means the account is already activated. So we set the error in the session, else we would set the success message in the session and then update the table with the status as 1 for that user, and then redirect the request to index.php. And on index.php, here we are reading the success message. So we read the success message from session and echo it, and then unset this variable in the session. So this is how this success message has been displayed. Now let's see, we again hit the same URL, then we get this error that your account is already activated or the URL is invalid. Because we have already activated this account, that's why this error is coming up. So that's all about the verification of the user part. Before we proceed further, let's talk about the couple of validations which we discussed during the registration part, which is if the username is present and then a new user tried to use that username, an error should occur, or if he uses an existing email, then error should occur as well. So now let's go to the registration form. So I provide some name over here. Now the username which I have taken is msingri. So I provide that username again. I provide an email address, same email address, abc@gmail.com, which is the email I have taken already, and I provide password and I click on register. It shows me the error. Username already exists and email already exists. So this is how, if an existing username is being used or an existing email is being used during registration, an error would be displayed to the user. Now let's add in the valid values. So I would just say test user, email as def@gmail.com, password abc123, and I just click on register. So this user is registered successfully, but we would not activate this user right now. I would tell you the reason later on in the slides. So this user is created successfully. Now we would understand the login functionality. So I would just click over here. So this is the login form and the file corresponding to it is index.php. So okay, so it's the same thing. We have included db.php over here. We started the session. If the user is logged in, then we would forward the request to profile.php. Else we would just going to render the login form. So same thing, we include header.php over here, which contains the css and js files, then navbar.php, which actually shows this navbar. Then okay, here is the form which is being displayed. So both username and password are required. So if I click on login, it shows me the error that please fill out this field. So the action for this form is index.php, means the same file. The method is post. So now let's log in into the system. So I provide the username as test user. I would provide the wrong password right now, let's say abc only, and I click on login. So it says, it gives me the error that invalid credentials. So let's see how this execution occurs. So as soon as you submit the form, user is not logged in, so request would come here. It checks that the method is post and you have clicked on the login button, so it includes this file which is login.php. So in this file what we are doing is we are fetching the username from the post, escaping it using real escape string, and then we are hitting the database to get the record corresponding to this username. If the results return are 0, it says username doesn't exist, and it would set this error in the session and which would be displayed in the front end. Or if the username exists, then we would call this function password verify. Here we would pass the password which is there in the post, and this is the hash value of the password in the database. So this is how we are going to verify the password. If this is successful, what we are going to do, we are going to fetch all the data from $user record and put it into the session over here along with the status for the user. If the so now as the credentials are valid, so user is logged in into the system. So we are setting this variable to identify that user is logged in into the session, and then we would forward the request to profile.php. Else we would display the error invalid credentials, which is being displayed right now on the screen. So this is the error that we have. In the file, we are getting the errors from the session here, and then we are displaying the error messages by executing this loop. So we iterate over the errors and display it like this, and then we set the errors in the session to an empty array. Moving ahead, let's enter an invalid username. So let's say if I'm giving the username as something like this and password anything, and then I click on login, it gives me the error that username is invalid, which is actually here. So username is invalid error is displayed on the screen. Now let's enter the valid credentials. So we are picking up the test user only, so we enter with the proper credentials. So I'm just clicking on login. Okay, so right now I'm logged in successfully. Now there are a couple of points which I would like to discuss. So if you see in the nav bar, you would see that register link is not there anymore, and it's right now what is displayed is the profile link and the logout link. This happens because in navbar.php we have put up this logic that if user is logged in, then we are rendering the profile and logout link, and if it's not, then we are showing the register link. So that's why these links are displayed over here. Now about this message, your account is unverified, please confirm your email by clicking on the link sent in the email. So how this message is being displayed? So as soon as we log in, right, so we headed over to profile.php. Now let's look into profile.php. So in profile.php we have a logic like this. Okay, so we start that we include the database file, we start the session over here, and we check if the login, if the user is not logged in, then we would just say login into the system. We would just set this error into the system that login into the system to access profile, and forward the request to index.php. Else we would just pick up the values from the session and store them in the variables where these values are set. I would just repeat it. We have just stored the values over here. So now moving ahead. Okay, now we would just check the status. So right now status is inactive, so we would just render this message to the user repeatedly. Your account is unverified, please confirm your email by clicking on the link sent in the email, so that user can activate his account, and then we are displaying the values corresponding to the user. So this is how profile page is being displayed to the user. Now let's discuss about the logout. Yeah, one more error is there. So if okay, I would just talk about that error as well. So that error is not here. Yeah, in profile.php what we have discussed is if user is not logged in and if this file is being hit, right, we would set the error in the session and then we would forward the request to index.php. So let's hit login profile.php. So I am redirected to the login screen with the error that we have set in the session, login into the system to access profile. So now let's log in, and we would discuss about the logout functionality now. So as soon as I click on it, let's see what happens. So it calls logout.php. So let's open that file. So this is logout.php. Here what we are doing is we are starting the session, we are unsetting all the variables in the session, and then we are destroying the session, and then we are forwarding the request to index.php. But this statement is very necessary. Always keep in mind, wherever you are doing header location stuff, you have to put exit after that to have the session work properly for you. So as soon as I click on logout, it redirects me on the index page, which is the login page. So I think I have covered the profile functionality in good detail. Now the next functionality that we are going to cover is forgot password. So okay, I click over here. So this is the forgot password form. Let's log in into the file for it. So this is the forgot password file. Okay, so let's discuss about it. Same thing over here, includes database file. Then start the session. There is no post right now. There are no errors as of now because we are coming onto the screen for the first time. Okay, this is the form for forgot password. The action is forgot password.php, so means same file. Then this is the email field, which is actually required. So if on the screen I click on submit, it gives me an error that please fill out this field. Now on the submission of the form, what happens? So basically if the forgot password form is submitted, it would just include the forgot.php, which is this file where all the processing logic for forgot password is written. So if I provide an invalid email, this query would result 0, return result as 0. So what we would do, we would set the error in the session and then we would forward the request to forgot password.php only. So let's test out this scenario. So I would just provide an invalid email over here, which is not there in the system. So okay, I would just say hij@gmail.com. So it gives me the error that no user with the email is there in the system. So the error rendering process remains same as it is there in other forms. So we are setting the error in the session and then we are picking the error from the session and then rendering the error here. Okay, now moving ahead, let's talk about if this functionality works perfectly fine. So the let's take the user Msingay and we provide the email address as abc@gmail.com and I just click submit. So form is submitted successfully. The message is being displayed over here like please check your email this for a confirmation link to reset your password. This is actually the body of the email message that is being sent to the user. It's the same thing, it's the local system, so we are not sending out the email. That's why I'm just displaying it on the screen. When you are working on the live environment, you can just remove it. Okay, so now let's look into the code where this logic is being created. So if I go to forgot.php, so here we are just picking the result for this query, then picking the email and hash from it, picking the first name, and then writing this message over here and setting it into the session, right? And this is the message body over here which we are creating. So the mail code I have just commented right now, and I have set another variable reset link. You just have to remove this code in production environment and then forward the request to forgot password.php, and on forgot password.php the success message is displayed like this. So we are just displaying the success message and then we are displaying the reset link as well, and then we are unsetting these variables in the session. So this is how we have got the link to reset the password. So now let's look into the reset password functionality. So this is the link we have. So I would just copy the link over here. Okay, so this link would call the reset.php file with these parameters, right? Email and hash. So this email is encoded, so same thing, it's base 64 encoded, and this is the hash which we have created, same as in the registration form. So okay, now let's look into reset.php. So this is reset.php file, same logic is over here. We started with database inclusion, then we start the session. Now here is the main logic. So we read the email and hash from $_ get array and check if these values are not empty. If they are empty, then we are going to throw an error that the verification fails. So let's check the errors first. So I would just copy the URL from here. I put it on browser and I would remove hash. So it says that we are sorry, your verification failed, please try again, which is the error being set over here. Now test it for email as well. So let's remove email from the URL. So same error, we are sorry, your verification failed, please try again. Now let's say we provide the valid URL. So no, before that let's test the invalid URL case as well. So I'm going to paste the URL over here, and then I would just change the email and press enter. It says URL is invalid, which is actually this error. Now let's put the valid URL. So it is redirected to reset password page properly. So let's look into the form right now. So these are the two fields, new password and confirm password, but there are two hidden fields as well, which is email and hash, which we have got in the request. Action is reset password.php. So let's open that file. Okay, so this is reset password PHP file. In this file, all the logic related to resetting password is written. So as soon as I click on submit, this action is invoked, which calls reset password.php. Here we check that if the request method is post, we would compare that the new password and the confirm password that is being provided by the user is equal or not. If it is equal, then we would hash the new password and then update the database with the new password and hash for the email, and then we would redirect the user to the login page. But in case the passwords doesn't match, then we would set an error into the session and redirect the request to reset.php. So first let's test this error. So this is the URL that we have. Okay, I'm going to just put the URL over here. I'm going to provide the password as abcd1234 and then this one as abc123, and I just click on reset. So the error gets displayed over here that two password doesn't match. Now let's test the success scenario. I would just provide the password as abcd1234 abcd1234 and I click on reset. Okay, now I get the success message that your password has been reset successfully. So whatever we have set over here, that your password has been reset successfully, is being shown on the login page. So now I would log in with the user msingai. So I am logged in successfully in the system, and this is the view profile screen. So okay, let's log out from here. So these are the functionalities that we have covered as part of this tutorial: registration, login, view profile and forgot password. And these are the files through which we have gone during the tutorial. That's all for this video. In case you have any questions or comment, please put them in the comment section. Also, I am going to put the link for the source code in the description section. In case you have liked the video, please don't forget to click the like button and hit subscribe. Thank you very much.